Evoluția armelor, chat, ia. Login de la Maximus W. De la piatră la bombă nucleară.
Alright, so this is the first weapon, probably. It's not a rock, it's a hand axe. Yeah, it's just a rock. Like many very early weapons, we probably use it for hunting and farming, and then someone was like, wait, you could kill someone with this. Boom! Weapon. I know it's just a rock, but it does look kind of cool. Why are weapons cool? We also had sticks and bones. Anything pointy, really. Then we started attaching rocks to sticks and unlocked spear, axe, and dagger.
Și a dat și voi like dacă sunteți noi să facem 5 like-uri măcar. Dați și voi like, vă rog frumos. Dați like.
So we actually had a lot of the basic weapons down pretty early, but these are really primitive. Literally primitive, actually. I mean, you can only throw a spear so far. But if there's one thing humans are good at, it's coming up with better ways to kill each other. This thing added range and power to the spear, and so did the sling for hurling rocks. Skilled slingers were actually quite deadly. The blowgun was probably the first air-powered weapon, and in Australia, and Africa, and India, the boomerang was used as a weapon. Imagine dying to a boomerang, or even worse, imagine dying to your own boomerang. I mean, statistically, that probably happened at least once.
Să-l arunci așa și să îți vină bumerangul așa în gură, să spargă așa toți dinții, să-ți vină așa pe gură așa.
In around 3000 BCE, the earliest armies used a new weapon that would give us unprecedented range on the battlefield: the bow. Mesopotamian warriors like the Assyrians had some seriously serious bows, spears, and... is that armor? Yes, in the Bronze Age, we developed armor to protect ourselves from all the weapons we were making. A nice big shield really helped with all the lion attacks. The ancient Egyptians had some really beautiful, ornate shields. The Egyptians deployed chariots, which provided a mobile platform from which to shoot, and generally looked really cool. The axe was their weapon of choice initially, but when they started fighting Middle Eastern peoples, they realized they also needed a blade capable of penetrating armor, and started incorporating one of the most iconic weapons in human history: the sword. The ancient Greeks also used a short sword and a very long spear for their famed...
Poți să-i W videoclipul ăsta, că el e deep. Hai că s-a vorbit. A dat și eu like aici.
Hoplites in tight shoulder-to-shoulder phalanx formations, with round shields and some truly iconic helmets. Of course, we can't talk about ancient weaponry without bringing up the Romans. The gladius, the pilum, and the scutum are some of the most recognizable and practical tools of war ever. Not to mention the lorica segmentata and a variety of impressive helmets and standards. Need to break down some walls or impale 6 men at once with a giant arrow? The Romans had a solution. Several, actually. The Franks, Anglo-Saxons, and Vikings all had their own variations of the sword, the shield, the battle axe, and by the 11th and 12th centuries, mail shirts for protection. I feel like it goes without saying, but the Vikings had some very cool helmets, and I'm not talking about these. I'm talking about these. The nasal guard helmet was practical, protected your face, and stylish. Looked cool. In the Middle Ages, the Japanese created one of the most iconic swords of all time, the katana, and the shorter version, the wakizashi, which was worn at the side when the katana had to be removed before entering certain locations. The Chinese had some interesting swords as well, like the Dao, which was actually used by the
o katana de asta să-mi cumpăr. O să cumperi o katana, nu e?
Mongols, though. Of course, the Mongols were better known for their horseback-mounted mastery of the bow. The bow played a huge role in medieval warfare. In Europe, we saw the rise of the longbow, which the English would become known for. Shooting a longbow required years of experience and immense strength, but it revolutionized warfare because even a small group of archers could loose hundreds of arrows per minute from great distances and basically decimate armies. The crossbow was much easier to use than the longbow, so it took less training and
Eu aș vrea să fiu o cavaler de ăla, în Middle Age, știi? Și să mă bat acolo cu toți aia, cu săbile așa, să dau unii, să...
still provided good power. It was perfect for defending castles,
Așa
but
de
it
asta vreau să fiu.
did have a longer reload
Da,
time.
deci, să-mi iau așa o săgeată în piept, așa, și să stau așa pe spate și să mor.
By the late medieval
Sau ceva.
period, crossbows could shoot 328 yards, or 300 meters. Why does this guy look so sly about it? The sword evolved into many familiar varieties during this time period, like the hand-and-a-half sword. The dagger was popular as a quick sidearm, self-defense, or maybe sneaky assassination weapon. Remember, it's always faster to switch to your... whatever. Staff weapons were very
Uite,
popular
de
in
asta
this
vreau să fiu. Cum îi zice? Knight sau ceva de genul. Nu știu, în română. Are foarte multă aura. E luat din filmul The King din 2019.
period, as the spear remained one of the most effective and easy-to-use weapons in hand-to-hand combat. But it wasn't just the spear, it was also the bill, the poleaxe, the halberd, the lance.
Noi le știm pe astea din jocul ăla, cum se numea? Ăsta. Din Half Sword, știm astea cea noi. Care e, mă, ăsta?
And the bardiche. We had
Bardisha.
a lot of halberd, the lance, and the bardiche. We had a lot of staff weapons. In Asia, we got the naginata and the santi, an Indian spear that had a convenient guard in the middle to allow for safe pokey-pokey. Make the staff handle a little shorter and you get another host of scary weapons. The warhammer could cave in helmets and break bones behind thick plate armor. The flanged mace, the morning star, and the flail are classic and sinister-looking medieval weapons. Meanwhile, the Aztecs were perfecting their own form of deadly warfare. They had the macohitl, a club with embedded blades made of obsidian. These things could decapitate a horse. They also had stone-flake throwing spears and some very stunning shields. Back in Europe, heavily armored knights dominated and wore a variety of legendary helmets, like the hound skull bassinet, the great helm, or the frog-mouthed helm for jousting. However, the heavy armor and thick castle walls of the medieval period would soon become obsolete. Gunpowder had arrived to the evolution of weapons. The Chinese had been using gunpowder for a while, in fire lances, early rockets, and primitive hand cannons, but now the knowledge of gunpowder had spread to Europe, thanks to the Mongols. The arquebus was an early firearm used from the 15th to 17th centuries. Then came the wheel-lock mechanism, which made for a better musket, followed by the flintlock, which made for an even better musket, if you think double the rate of fire is better.
Mamă, din 1500, în 1500 existau puși de astea, rifle-uri? Eu credeam că din 1800 sau ceva de genul l-au inventat.
Gunpowder weapons were just starting to be used. There was a period where we made armor thicker for a bit and then gave up. This is a pretty interesting era called pike and shot, where you had units that mixed traditional hand weapons, like pikes, with the new gunpowder weapons, and they were actually really effective. As metalworking improved, we were able to make some really big guns like bombards, serpentines, and culverins, and some really interesting ones like the ribolt, or organ gun. Fine, I'll play my 8th playthrough of Medieval 2 Total War. You convince me. But despite these advancements, we still use swords. This large two-handed sword was used by the famous Lanzknecht mercenaries to counter the popular pikes of the day. In Scotland, we got the claymore, or greatsword, a truly colossal and impressive weapon. And though these larger swords could be a bit cumbersome, they did have other uses too. By now we had all kinds of swords actually. Cavalry swords, basket-hilted swords, hunting swords, small swords, and rapiers. We love swords. We even came up with a sword that countered the sword breaker. That's pretty cool looking. India gave us the I-ati, which had an almost comically thick blade. Also from the east came the curved shamshir, also known as the scimitar. Another really interesting sword is the kora, which was used by warriors and Gurkhas in Nepal. Daggers were still popular as well, with variations such as the stiletto, or assassin's dagger. I told you they were useful for assassinations. This dagger from India is crazy. The katar is designed to allow the stabber to punch into the opponent.
You thrust it into your opponent's belly like that, you see? 15th century. Smart little buggers back then, weren't they?
Meanwhile, firearms were getting much better. Better flintlock systems made guns even more deadly, giving birth to the legendary Brown Bess musket of the early 18th century. This weapon was so ubiquitous, the British Redcoats used the phrase "married to Brown Bess" as a shorthand for military service.
Unde aș vrea să fiu?
Used the phrase "married to Brown Bess."
Uite, fix ăsta să fiu. Să merg așa cu arma asta în mână, așa.
As a shorthand for military service. Then we made little guns, also known as pistols. So now we could duel with dueling pistols. We loved guns so much that we tried to put them on our swords. Actually, we put them on everything. But I'm going to take a wild guess and say that these did not work very well. But the guns in the next period of history would work just fine. Throughout the 18th century, field artillery started to shift the evolution of weapons yet again. And that would be especially true during the Napoleonic Wars, when one brilliant general expanded and perfected its use. It's no coincidence, Napoleon was...
Mă, bă, ăsta a luat așa, m-a luat toată istoria. Nu mai e nevoie de școală, te uiți la videoclipurile la băiatul ăsta. Ia vezi, e regele pe istorie ăsta. Ei, dar postează o dată pe lună. Hai că da. A postat 10 videoclipuri din...
Trained as an artilleryman. We had many kinds of field guns, howitzers, and mortars at our disposal.
Mortar, ca pe Clash Royale. Îmi place rău mortarul pe Clash Royale. Folosesc mereu.
In the revolutionary world, we still use swords. I'm telling you, we love swords. Now for infantry, swords have been effectively replaced by the musket, but cavalry soldiers still use them. The sword was a status symbol and could be ceremonial as well. The Ottomans had some incredible swords like the kalij or the yataghan. The bayonet was used heavily during this period. Turns out putting our swords on our guns was a good idea. The Nepalese kukri has an interesting
What? Există în viața reală?
forward curved blade and remains
Chiar așa arată și kukri knife de pe CS.
popular to this day among
A existat în viața
collectors and
reală?
enthusiasts.
Ia vezi, Zulu. Nu, ăsta e ce film, cred, mă.
Now, interestingly, we still have some people using ancient weapons at this time, like the Zulu, who employed a short stabbing spear and actually won some battles against the British Empire. Eventually, though, modern firepower would win out. This old world versus new world was a recurring theme, as we saw Native American tribes fighting with tomahawks, clubs, and of course, the bow. Some from mounted positions, much like the steppe people from an earlier age. Meanwhile, firearms were getting even better. We developed the percussion cap, and eventually, the revolver. This was a big one. Being able to fire multiple shots in quick succession without reloading greatly improved effective firepower. But that was just the beginning. Rifling in the barrels of muskets gave us more range and accuracy, which we saw in the deadly American Civil War. The expanding bullet took advantage of the rifled barrels and doubled the effective range of firearms. The Enfield rifle musket was effective beyond its cited range of 820 meters. Repeaters, self-loading pistols, and breech loaders improved the rate of fire even more. The Prussians used the Drace needle gun, a breech-loading rifle to beat the Austrians who still used muzzle loaders in Königgrätz in 1866. We even had breech-loading cannons by now. With the flood of advancing technology, one of the greatest weapons of war became industrialization, the mass production of arms, and the logistics of supply and distribution. Yes, I know that's not really a weapon. In 1884, a new gun was created that would signal the end of another age of weaponry: the Maxim machine gun. With the outbreak of the Great War in 1914, new weapons were invented to break the stalemate that had developed from the testing of the new weapons. Mechanized weapons of war in the air, the sea, and the land appeared. Better machine guns, better artillery, deadly gas, grenades, and flamethrowers were all used in World War I. In the Second World War, infantry soldiers played a reduced role as new machines roared to the front lines. By this point, we had developed a ridiculous variety of guns. Self-loading pistols became popular, along with shotguns and an array of rifles, manually loaded like the Mauser Kar-98, or self-loading like the M1 Garand. The Sturmgewehr 44 was a German rifle that had a 30-round detachable magazine and led the way for the automatic weaponry of the future. We had sniper rifles, light machine guns, and submachine guns, like the Thompson, which I discovered was known as the Chicago typewriter.
Ăsta e... Ce-am făcut, mă, mâncava-și gura?
Light machine guns. And for that, we had rocket launchers like the M1A1 bazooka. We had to come up with some better helmets to protect ourselves from all the better guns. And in World War I, it led to designs such as the classic British Brodie helmet. The Germans still used their spiked pickle. It led to the classic British Brodie helmet. The Germans still used their spiked pickelhaube helmets in the Great War. This was a design going back to the 19th century. But in 1916, they moved to the Stahlhelm. In World War II, the Americans used this helmet, which they called the M1. Creative. And guess what? We still used swords. Well, at this point, they were almost all ceremonial, unless you count the bayonet as a sword, because we still use those. At the close of World War II, all the weapons of the past were dwarfed by the destructive power of the nuclear bomb. And that brings us to an end of this video on the evolution of weapons from rock to nuke.
De la piață la...
Oh, I forgot to mention the pistol shield. It was a pistol in a shield.
Wow, pistolul în pete sau ceva, da. Ia, te dăm cu horrorul?